report out from closed session. And we are starting with, I'm opening a public hearing for the proposal for implementing school facility fees as authorized by Education Code Section S 17620 and Government Code 65995. So our comments, questions?
So let me just talk a little bit about, so we're trying something a little bit different now with the board. We are opening up, we're doing our public comment a little different. There's really going to be 3 opportunities to comment on things tonight. One obviously is if you want to talk about this open public hearing that Board President Webster just opened up for school facilities fees. The other will be on any item that is on the agenda. And then there's the general time for the public that'll be coming up shortly for non-agendized items. And so if you have an interest in commenting on those items, you'll wait till we get to those items, and we will you'll be utilizing the raised hand function, which is on your in your Zoom link. And Ashley, are you there?
I'm here.
Can you speak to the raised hand function? Show them how to get to that.
Yeah, so if you have not used the raised hand function before, what you're going to need to do is at the bottom of your screen, you may need to kind of move your mouse around and hover over the area to find it. You should have a participants button. When you click the participants button, you should see the option to raise your hand. It'll either be in text or there may be a little hand icon. When you click on that, you can raise your hand. You'll wait for the moderator to call your name and we'll turn on your microphone. We'll get more into that in a little bit. If you are dialing in from a phone and not on a computer or smartphone or tablet, what you're going to want to do is press star and then 9, and that will raise your hand in the meeting.
Okay. So we are now, as Board President noted, she has opened the public hearing for 5.1 implementation of school facilities fees as authorized by Ed Code.
So do you want me to give a little summary of what they are?
That would be helpful.
So school facilities fees have been authorized since 1986. And the last time that we brought a developer fee justification study to the board was back in 2015, October of 2015. School facilities fees are commonly known as developer fees. And so you'll probably hear me say developer fees quite a bit. So developer fees are simply fees that are authorized by the government code for schools to levy in order to offset the impact of development. And so if a developer comes in and builds 100 houses, for example, or a multi-use complex where there's residential, then we are, and let's say that 100 unit housing complex generates 50 kids, right? So all of a sudden we have to have room to have those 50 students join our schools. And so the government code authorizes us to levy these fees in order to offset the impact or the cost of potentially having to add classrooms. So think about McKinley Elementary School. We have had growth at McKinley for the past 3 or 4 years, and we have over the past 3 years added classroom portables. We currently have 4 new portables that we've added. They're roughly about $100,000 per portable. The state does not provide us with any funding in order to offset the cost of adding portables or the lease payments, the monthly/annual lease payments that we have for those portables. We have portables at numerous of our school sites. Cherry Valley, for example, I think we have 5 or 6 leased portables, of which we pay an annual fee to the modular company where we lease them. So we can authorize, or the district is authorized to levy these fees, and the fees have to be used for capital improvements or lease payments on portables, for example, that have a nexus to growth. So every 2 years, those fees authorized by the government code are increased by inflation. And so the last time we accessed the increased fees was back in 2016. So we brought a developer fee justification study to the board in October of 2015. So when the fee increase went into effect July of 2016, we were able to increase our fees accordingly. So the fees were also increased in 2018. We did not bring an increase to the board at that time. They were then increased again July 1st of 2020. And so this justification study is to basically provide detailed justification about why we believe those fees are essential for our schools. Pen Grove is growing. We know that Casa Grande, we're estimating will have over 1,800 students. That shows clear growth. We know we're out of classroom space at both Petaluma High School and at Casa Grande, and we may have to consider either adding classroom buildings, formal official buildings, or adding portables. And so these fees are a way that we have in order to offset that cost. They will by no means cover the entire cost. If we build a classroom building, these fees will by no means cover that total cost. And so anyway, that's kind of a summary. The justification study was posted on our website about 10 days ago. We have advertised or published the notice in the paper twice in the last couple weeks. And we're coming to you tonight later with a resolution, two resolutions, one for each of our districts. And so the public hearing is basically just that, to give the public an opportunity to comment. Does that provide enough detail? Okay, good.
Thank you, Chris.
Chris, can you give us just an estimate of, what the developer fees bring into the district on average?
Oh, that's a really good question. It varies greatly from year to year and by district. So remember, the fee itself, and if you read through it, we get a percentage of the fee. So the high school district roughly gets 46%. All of our feeder district, or most of our feeder districts, also levy school fees. And so they also get a percentage for the ones that are on the east side of town. So I can tell you right now what we collected last year. If you give me just a moment, I can pull that up quickly. Hold on, just about there. I'm sorry, my system is super slow.
That's okay.
Is that just
So in 2020, and by the way, we're obligated to provide an annual report to you all within 6 months of us closing the fiscal year. And so every December, we bring to you the annual developer fee report that kind of discloses what we've collected, what we spent the money on, what the plans are. So for example, last year in the elementary district, we collected just under $136,000. In the secondary district, we collected just over $298,000.
Is that just new construction?
No, it can be things like portables. It can be a renovation.
Oh, no, I meant that you're collecting from.
Oh, good question. It's over 500 square feet of usable space. And it's any kind of expansion of space. So it could be new construction, or it could be if you're adding on, usable, livable space on your house and you're adding 1,000 square feet, it could apply to that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have an open public hearing. Is there anyone that wanted to comment specifically on this item?
Please raise your hand.
I don't see one, so.
Okay. At that point, we will close the public hearing and move on. Adoption and approval of the agenda for July 21st, 2020, tonight.
I move to approve.
Thank you.
Move to approve. Yeah.
Is that a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Did you just oppose?
No, she was late with her.
Okay.
I think it was a delay.
No, it's delayed.
Okay, sorry. And now I'm really happy to introduce Dr. Harrington, the Sonoma County Superintendent of Schools. He's going to talk to us about issues related to COVID-19 and schools reopening. And so I hope he's here.
You'll have to unmute him. So I think I can unmute you, Dr. Harrington. Hold on. There we go.
Hey, you
So-
probably don't want to unmute me, Gary.
Yeah, just kind of as an intro, I think that Dr. Harrington and the superintendents in Sonoma County were not quite prepared for the roller coaster ride that we have been on since March. And his leadership in this whole process has been truly invaluable as we've tried to really peel the layers back and on this onion, and they continue to be peeled back seemingly on a daily basis. And so I know that the board had an interest and wanted to hear from him firsthand on some of the issues that we're faced right now, and have an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you for inviting me as a board. Normally, when I come to a school board meeting as the county superintendent, it's usually in my AB 1200 capacity, and that isn't always a good situation for districts to find themselves in, because I've had to be in that area of responsibility of oversight for 7 districts in the past in my tenure as county superintendent, all of which are now positive again. But this time it's nice to come and talk about something other than finances in total, but I'd like to talk a little bit about where we have come. This whole year has been a roller coaster year. If you go back to the fire, if you go back to the mass evacuations, if you go back to 2 years ago when we had the Tubbs fire, and then we had the Gravenstein evacuation for flooding. So this has been a very challenging 2 or 3 years for students, all of which have created an emotional impact on student populations throughout the county. We ended last year on basically with the pandemic, and we were put on 1 week's notice onto distance learning without any definitions or structure to implement it. But we did the best we could in the time that we had. And now we're starting another school year, and we were given guidance at the beginning on what to prepare for. And that guidance changed, I would say, at least 3 or 4 times over since May. And then we got the state budget, which gave us more additional guidance. And I'm going to go over some of those factors tonight. But that's sort of the roller coaster ride that we're on. So if I could have the next slide, please. 2 key documents that I'm going to be talking about is the reopening framework document and the industry guidance for the watch list, and why schools have now been put under that guidance for the watch list. So those are the 2 things we're going to really be focusing on in this report. Both of those documents, if you don't have them, they're available on our SCO website under health guidelines and updates. So check there. Next slide. There are 5 key areas in these documents. They talk about safe in-person school-based on local health data. You are encouraged as a district under the budget trailer bill to have school that is student and person-based instruction. Students need to have in-person based instruction. Well, that's a very challenging event under COVID-19, but you need to have a plan, and I'm sure Gary and your instructional team have been working on a plan on how do we get to school-based instruction. And we have either multi-phase steps, which have included hybrid models, small cohort groupings, split schedules, a variety of things, all of which is trying to provide the community with in-person instruction as the best we can. Then we have a requirement on masks as it relates to COVID-19, and that has switched 2 or 3 times from at the state level and at the local county level. So I'll go over that with you. Then we have the physical distancing standards for students, and we have physical distancing standards for adults, and we have adaptations to those physical distancing standards. So I will go over that as well. And then, of course, as a staff and the board, everyone, we want to provide an environment that's safe and for all constituent groups, teachers, students, and families. So we're going to talk about testing and contact tracing. And then we know that we have to provide distance learning throughout the whole year because parents will have the right and have the choice to remain on distance learning should they wish to. And the components of distance learning, as I said earlier, in March, they were not defined. They are now defined. And they have audit requirements that we're learning about gradually over the next couple of weeks, which will be interesting to find out how well we do on the new standards. Next slide. So let's talk about the watch list. The county has now been put on the watch list. So that automatically puts, and that's what the governor changed from our original directive under SB 98. He left everything at this local level for the schools to decide or the school boards to decide. But because California, and we have some counties that have a positivity rate of 22%, and some counties in LA are 12%. And when you look at Sonoma County, we're only at 3%. So out of every 100 people tested, only 3% are positive. But because the state has multiple variables in that epidemiology that they look at, we were put on the watch list. And I'm going to go over what the watch list has in it. And what he tried to do was try to get some sort of standardization. So about 90% of California's 6.2 million students, 200,000 students, are basically going to be opening school under distance learning. And so that's where we are as a county. Now, a district may request a waiver for its elementary students, and we're still investigating if it goes up to grade 8 because there's a contradiction in the law, would you believe? Because a secondary school is considered 7 through 12, and you have a secondary district, which is 7 through 12. So for you, you would be looking at your elementary district, which is K-6. And you can offer a waiver for small in-person cohorts for instruction on a campus. That you have to seek a waiver if you're on the watch list, and that's what you wish to do. Now you could wait to get off the watch list, which we'll go over with that. That's, I think, August 14th, I believe, but I'll look at my notes in just a minute. And then you don't need a waiver. Well, I don't know when your school day is set, but most of our schools are starting around mid-August. So you might just want to wait for that and not have to go through that process. There's no waivers required once you come off the watch list. So you could, and then you could open with small cohorts on your campus, which is a local board's decision. And they may want to do it for their EL or their special ed populations or have small cohorts of 12 to 16 kids in a classroom. Because remember, many parents are going to want to still stay with distance learning. After you've been on it for 20 school days, or what we call a school month, if there's health data that supports it, which means you haven't had an outbreak or you haven't had any exposure levels, things have been moderate attendance-wise, the district will be given authority by the county to move to what we call distancing standards for students less than 6 feet. That means you have flexibility. If you want to increase your cohort size, you can increase your cohort size to what is called a 4-foot distancing standard. Now, these are the standards currently used in Europe. Basically, they use the word 1 metric, 2 metric. And the 1 metric standard is for students, and the 2 metric standard is for teachers. Well, being Americans, we don't use the metric system. We use the good old linear feet. So for students, it could be 3 to 4 feet. And for teachers, it has to be 6 feet. And we'll talk about exposure rates. Children, the younger the student is, the less probability of exposure. And that's because they have a higher immune factor to this disease. Adults don't have that same immune factor. Therefore, the adult must always keep a 6-foot distancing standard, and the students can have a lesser distancing standard. But once again, that's going to be based on data that's generated based on your students' exposures in your school setting once you start to open up to go to small cohort instruction. And at that time, after that one point of elementary practice and exposure rates, and if they're down, the district may then opt to implement its plan for secondary students, whatever that may be. But once again, it's always the district's choice at these things. You may want to still stay on waivers, or excuse me, still stay on distance learning till you have a natural sequence of information. And for some districts, I know that Santa Rosa is looking at the first quarter, which actually is 2 school months. And then they're going to look at their data expansion at that time. So it's up to you. Each district could set it. And who knows, in 2 school months, if you look at the next block, we could be back on the watch list. So to avoid this yo-yo effect on schools, if you open, and you open with a cohort, and you start the school somewhere in that process, does it mean you have, and the county falls back onto the watch list, does that mean you automatically the next day have to switch to going to distance learning? And the answer is no, you don't have to automatically switch. What you can choose to do is let the county monitor you, and they would use the quarantining standards that I'm going to get into. And you can continue to operate your programs. Or you may choose as a board to say, you know, we don't wish to go through that process. We wish to go back on distance learning. That's a local decision by district. But you're going to be switching your families back and forth. And I strongly encourage that you might want to look at some sort of consistent pattern, natural sequences and breaks, when to go on and when to go off as it relates to the calendar. And once you know, I'm starting to put this on everything. This is all subject to change based on state and county health conditions, because it changed from last week to this week, and I'll make you a bet it's going to change again next week. Something will change. Next slide, please. Safe in-person school-based instruction based on local health data. What the county does is, in the counties that the state's monitoring, a school must remain on distance learning on a watch list. They can consider reopening for in-person instruction, which is what the state's calling it, once the county has been off the monitoring list for 14 consecutive days. Sonoma County is currently on the watch list through August the 2nd. That means that the earliest possible date that schools could reopen would be August 14th. So you might just want to look at delaying everything. That's another possibility. You would have to meet with your bargaining unit to see if you want to do a delayed calendar. You still have to get the 180 days in. And remember, all these sections, there's 120 new sections to the education code, all dealing with distance learning and all dealing with this cohort and hybrid model, none of which is waivable under a J14. So that's something to consider, especially, and I've told the superintendents, if we have a PSPS public power shut off, you're still accountable for instruction on that day. Every student's entitled to instruction, and if there's no power, you've got to make it up. So then you're going to have an extended school calendar for those kids that are in that environment. So that's something to keep in mind. The criteria to get off the watch list is quite strict, and I'm going to go over that. Once off the watch list, districts are still subject to SB 98, which is the budget trailer funding bill, which requires that all schools should be working and shall offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. And that's in the statute. Now, we'll talk about what the greatest extent possible is under these conditions. Next slide. So this is the criteria. You have to have, there's 4 points of criteria. The case rate, which is per $100,000, I wish it was money, per 100,000 has to be greater than 100, or a case rate per 100,000 at 25. And testing has to be at positivity of 8%. So there's a combination factor, and I'll show you on the next chart what that looks like. The positivity rates has to be evaluated, the transmission rates have to be evaluated, and the hospital capacity rates have to be evaluated. The next slide, and these are the two data points you can monitor for interest. One is the county's data monitoring website and the county's data monitoring criteria. So you can follow that along as we sit out these 14 days. Next slide. So let's look at the threshold. That's the top box, which means you have to test up to threshold testing of 150 participants. You have to have a case rate of no greater than 100, or you have to have a case rate no greater than 25 with a positivity rate of 8%. And that's really applies more towards the rural counties. And the increase in hospitalization can't be greater than 10%. And of course, your limited hospital capacity has to be less than 20%. At the bottom, you see where Sonoma County is. We test at we had 244.3 people in the testing. I don't know how you have a 0.3, but anyway, you had 244 people in the testing. The elevated test transmission rate was we're over 100, which is not acceptable, at 112. Our test positivity rate for a 7-day average is 3%. So we're very good there. But our case rate is high. It's over. And our percentage of increase over a 3-day average for hospitalization shouldn't be greater than 10%. And it's currently at 25%. So those two factors, the case rate is up and the hospitalization increase is up. The other factors on ICU beds and ventilators were satisfactory. So in the next 14 days, and if you've been following it on the paper, you have seen that our transmission rate is coming down, not as fast as we would like, and our increase in hospitalization has pretty been, I'd say, stagnant, but I don't know how it is over the 14-day period. So anyway, these are the factors that put us on the watch list. And 90% of the students in California are on the watch list because those are the counties with the greatest population. Next slide, thank you. Okay, let's say you wanted to apply for a waiver. A superintendent of any school district, and remember, these conditions are applicable not only to public schools, but they're applicable to private schools and charters. So that is something that's currently being investigated by the private schools, having to come under the education code, but they're also under the government code and health codes. So that's something the health department's checking out. But it's been a new area of supervision for us. The superintendent of schools with the district with an elementary school site or sites can seek a waiver to continue to operate in-person instruction from their local health officer. Once again, this is based on the fact that younger children have a lower exposure rate and their ability to fight off the disease is greater at the younger ages. So because of this request must be made, but it has to be made in consultation with your labor groups, your parents, and your community organizations. So that's really what you call your stakeholder engagements. And I know that you've been having meetings to talk about your school plan. All of those meetings are documented. All of that is validation that you've made consultation. The local health official will review your application for consideration of a waiver. And they must review it as it relates to epidemiology for the county and public health intervention staff. Now, let me tell you this, we have 10 or 11 requests. I would say 9 of those requests are all private school requests because they look at it as an opportunity to capture an audience, to be quite honest. And the California Department of Public Health will be providing more information on the waivers. There is no waiver form. There is no waiver application at the county level or at the state level. This is being formed this week. We were told to have it by Friday, but more than likely we won't get it till next week because that's about the turnaround time at the state level. So we've been working on developing a protocol for requesting waivers with the county health. And right now the protocol was finalized today that you can either request a waiver through the county superintendent of schools office or the county public health officer. either one will put you on the list for a waiver, and you will be waiting. Now, you may end up waiting up to the 14 days and you won't need the waiver. So it's all part of the process. It changes dramatically. The next slide. Okay, the mask requirement has been an area of discussion throughout the state. When we developed, and Gary was on the committee that developed the county roadmap to reopening our schools, the mask requirement was permissive for grades 2nd grade to kindergarten. And that was at the direction of our county health director. And it was required for grades 3rd through 12th grade. And masks must be worn, or if the face shield, unless they're exempted. Children 2 and under do not wear masks. It's a breathing issue. Children in 2nd grade and below are encouraged but not required to wear masks, and that should be part of your protocol. And schools, under the new guidelines for this masks, schools must exclude students from campus if they are not exempt and refuse to wear a mask provided by the school. Schools should develop protocols to provide a face covering to students who inadvertently fail to bring a face mask and covering. And all of those materials are going to be distributed starting next week. But those are coming from the state. The state's funding the first 60 days of protective equipment supplies, PES. Schools should offer alternative educational opportunities. So you could have a student who says, I don't want to wear a mask, I don't like wearing a mask, he's a 5th or 6th grader, then you need to put him or her into your alternative education opportunity, which is distance learning. So that's where the student comes into it, distance learning. Masks can be removed for meals, nap times, and outdoor recreation. Those are obvious. Okay. And the next slide. Physical distancing standards and other adaptations. Staff must, even if you go to increasing your cohort size, they must still stay 6 feet between each other and students. Oftentimes teachers will draw me a classroom where they show all the desks 6 feet apart. And I say, now put the teacher in the middle of that room and draw a 6-foot circle around that teacher. And guess what? They bump into somebody within that beautiful drawing. And you probably have to take 4 to 6 seats out and get it down to about 14 to 16 students in a classroom. You might, if some of you have oversized classroom, you might be able to do more than that. To open with, in the cohorts, students will be 6 feet apart. Symptoms check must be part of your daily protocol with your families and with your school. Hand washing must be part of your protocol at the school. Sanitation and disinfection must be part of your protocol in the school. And you must follow the quarantine protocols for implementation. The next slide. Testing and contact tracing. This is the part that has the greatest confusion to it because nobody has sent out directives on how this is going to be done. There's a requirement that if you open with staff and students present, you should develop a system by which staff is periodically tested. Ideally, it's recommended 50% of a school. So you have 25 teachers, you could put 12 on one rotation and 13 on the other rotation. And for the staff, it's voluntary, but you have set up a protocol by which they can be tested. The contact tracing, Governor Newsom said that schools will be prioritized for contact tracing. Right now, when you go to the state website, schools are number 3 on the list. And we have argued that if you're going to open schools, we're going to have to move up on the list for contact tracing because people need the reassurance and the security of that it's safe to return to work. Next slide. Distance learning requirements. This is all new ed code. You have to access, every student needs to have access to a device and connectivity for all kids. Petaluma was the first district in this county to do one-to-one equipment and placement for students. So the board should be commended. I think that was about 4 or 5 years ago they made that effort to move forward on that. So you had connectivity greater than most of our districts. You need to have in your instruction, and Chris will be working with the auditors to find out how do we monitor this, because this is a monitoring requirement under audit. Daily live interaction with teachers and other students. So the teacher must have daily interaction with the students, and the students must have daily interaction with each other. And that has to be monitored of some form. You must have challenging assignments and equivalent to in-person classes, and you must adapt lessons for English language learners and special education students. And there must be some form of assessment and measurement of student work, which means grades, or whatever you're using for evaluation of student performance. So that's part of the code, and then that's all connected to auditing. We haven't seen the audit standards, and we don't know. Those are not normally released until October, but we've been pursuing it with the State Controller's Office, Betty Yee's office, and she started the process early. So hopefully those results will be out early, so we can either do mid-year or early course corrections if we're not doing it just exactly right. So next slide. When should school close? Okay, you've opened. Schools should consult with public health officer first before they even determine if a school should close. The classroom cohort, if a student in a cohort is tested COVID positive, they go home, and the students in that cohort go home, and they are on 14 days out of the school setting, or 14 days, because you could have a weekend in there, but you could have 14 days, and they are needed to put on distance learning as at the next day, because they are not to have interrupted instruction. Schools go home when they have multiple cohorts, 2 or 3 classes, or they have more than 5% of their total student population positive. And then a school is on closed, is quarantined, but the district is still operational. And it could be, it has nothing to do with the watch list at this time. It's what the existing conditions are. So your district could still be operational, your 2 high schools could be operational, but you may have 2 elementary schools down. The district goes home, or the district converts to total distance learning, it goes back on the list if 25% of its schools, remember there the measurement is schools, not students, if 25% of the schools are closed within the 14-day period. So that means you really have a surge or an outbreak in your community. And it makes sense to put everybody immediately back on distance learning. The health officer can determine if a school closure is warranted at the local epidemiological stages. So she may not like the fact, let's say you don't have 5% of your school population isn't positive, and you only have 2 cohorts out of a school of 12. She still has the right to move that school to a closure, even though the numbers might not be exactly as stated. She has that right to do that. There is a specific scenario, a guidance scenario that we have posted. It's at the California Department of Public Health. It's a guidance document. On it, page 3, it says, if this, what about this? And it goes through a series of scenarios of how to handle it at a school. Next slide, thank you. When can school sites reopen? They can reopen after the 14 days of closure have occurred, and after 24 hours, cleaning staff can go in after that fact. And it must be clean, disinfected. We're recommending you might even want to have it tested, air tested. And you do public health investigation will be also out at the site before you can reopen. And it will be done in consultation with the public health department when you can reopen. Next slide. The cost impacts. This does not come cheap. You will have increased operating cost. We figure your operating cost on a daily average will probably increase by 30%. There are some additional funds to help offset that. They're not all here, but you have CARES 3 funds, which are federal funds, and I emphasize this to every district. They must be expended before December 31st, or the money goes back to the federal government. So please look at anything COVID related. If you want to start ordering all your supplies out of those funds, do so. But make the feds use those federal dollars. They're based on your socioeconomic factor for your school population and your Title I population. Currently, before the federal government is looking at HEROES Act. It's called the HEROES Act Fund. Those funds will cover essential employees, which school employees are. All employees are essential employees under public schools. Offices are supposed to be reopening. You should have a phase-in plan for that, just like you have a phase-in plan for your schools. But anyway, and the HEROES Act funds will cover and offset a lot of your costs as it relates to equipment purchases throughout the rest of the year that you're going to have to pay out of pocket. But it's also a payment back to the state of California for money it's paid out of pocket. And if the Budget Act, which is SB 98, promises that schools would not have their budgets cut. But when the money comes from the federal government under the HEROES Act, they will use it to offset the late payments they're making to schools. So let's talk about that. You're in the middle of this crisis, and by the way, we're not going to cut your budgets, but we're not going to pay you on time. So let's go to the next slide. So let's look at this. Yeah, why don't you go ahead and hit it all the way in? Thank you. You had a payment due to you in June. They're not going to make that payment until July, and they're only going to give you 55% of what we owe you, folks. And we'll pay up, we'll get you caught up by the end of July on what we owed you. Then in February, you have another payment due, and we're going to take from February to November to pay off that payment. So first of all, First of all, you will have a payment of about the state owes 154, but the local district picks up the shortfall. So your cash reserves and the cash you have on hand is imperative you stay fluid. We use a phrase, accountants use a phrase, cash is king. If you don't have enough cash on hand and you don't have enough cash to cover your payroll, and you may have that problem, then you need to know that cash will have to come out of your reserves to cover or borrow from other accounts that you may have. Then you have another late payment in March, and you will get March's payment strung out till October, and you're only going to get 72% of that payment, and that's what's going to happen. And then, of course, you have another payment due in April, and it's going to be strung out to September, and you're only going to get 72% of that payment. And then, of course, you have another payment in May from the state, and you're only going to get 72% of that payment. And of course, a lot of these times it hits when you have a large cash draw on your accounts. So please keep that in mind when working with your CBO and your superintendent. You may need to borrow funds. The county office is a resource for borrowing. You're a larger district than normal. We normally can cover the small districts. What we're looking at doing for all 40 school districts is creating a pool, borrowing pool, using the county's credit, the County of Sonoma schools, credit rating, and borrow. So let's say Chris comes to and say, we need at least to cover for our cash flow, maybe $3 million. And Santa Rosa says, we need about $7 million. And all the districts come in. Collectively, we would borrow $50 million because that's what the total came in. We would cover the front costs and cover that, make it a deferral, and you would draw against that account. Eventually, when you get your new money, we pay our payment back. So we start making the payments out of that pool. You could do it yourself. You could go out and borrow on your own. That's no problem. It doesn't hurt our feelings at all. So if you want to carry those costs, then you do those. But the thing is, we're here to try to backfill and help districts get through this, because we don't want districts to go under. And if you don't have a way to borrow money, we'll help make it happen. Next slide. That's where we are. So that sort of tells you the COVID situation, where we are moving from, where we moved from last week, where we thought we were all going to open with small cohorts or a blended program, to the state saying, wait a minute, this is growing too far out of hand. As I said, Southern California is just a hotbed of exposure right now. And so they are really clamping down, and they're thinking of even shutting down again the entire LA County, which is a good portion of the student population. So I wouldn't travel south for a while. But anyway, that's where we are, and we are trying to make the best out of it as we come. We've been resilient through the fires. We've been resilient through the floods. We'll be resilient through the pandemic. Thing I haven't had to deal with is a tsunami, and we're also in a tsunami zone, so who knows what's going to happen. So anyway, that's where we are, and I'll take questions. And I don't know how you're going to, so just tell me who the question is or speak up.
I can start if that's all right.
Sure. Sheldon.
Yeah. So I want to get to the issue in the guidance for distance learning, that the educational quality is supposed to be of the same rigor as in person, and yet the instructional minutes per day is dropped by 2 hours from, I think it's 360 to 240.
Yeah, the minimum day, it's a minimum day schedule.
So are we asking teachers to develop a 240-minute instructional day that is of equal quality and scope to the 360, or are we accumulating a learning debt here that we are going to put on top of the fires and the power shortages?
We are compounding our problem. To be quite honest with you,
that's what I thought.
We are compounding our problem because the best of teachers out there will try to make the best learning environment possible. But without that person-to-person contact, and without that interaction of a day, a full day, which I'm sure goes from your schools, probably goes from 8:30 to 3 o'clock, thereabouts, those loss of hours, you're losing your PE minutes, you're losing your enrichment minutes, you're losing the other components. So they're just supposed to concentrate in those minimum days of 240 minutes for 4th through 12th grade, 230 for 1st through 3rd, and 180 for kindergarten. In those minimum day minutes, they are only to cover the core content areas.
So that's what I thought. And so I want to ask you a really big picture question. How do we make up this accumulating debt we have to our students over the years? PG&E told us you can expect 10 days of power outages for the next 20 years. You accumulate that over the career of a student from kindergarten to 12th grade, and lay on top of that this COVID emergency. How do we make this up?
Well, I tried. There's a bill in the legislature called SB 884, which was to allow us to make up days, any district that lost more than 5 days off their calendar due to, and it was a list of events, and I got added in PS days, public power failures, because those are not events of God, as they would state in the Ed Code. So those days, you had to file a waiver for all those. If you had one of those qualifying events and you lost more than 5 days of instruction, you could ask for a state supplemental grant for a summer program or extended school year program. That bill cleared committee and went to appropriations. They took out the money because we're in a state financial crisis, but they added the language that allowed you to apply for get a waiver on a J13A for power failures. It's just automatic. So Senator Dodd introduced that bill, and my feeling was, of course, the whole state was in a loss of instruction, and the state couldn't afford it because it was never meant to cover for a whole state of 6 million people. It was meant to cover for a county or a geographic region that lost under a natural disaster. And I was trying to make up days for the days we lost for the fires when the bill was submitted. So we can start again, because it's going to happen again on individual issues. But there is no way to make it up. Plus, I'm going to address a question here that hasn't been raised. Our students have to deal with social emotional issues based on a series of compounding situations. Our teachers have had to deal with it on a compounding issue. Our classified, our bus drivers, everyone has had to deal with this displacement, reorganization. My life is in turmoil because of it. And that creates a stress on kids, whether it's intended or not. And so we know this is adverse childhood experiences. And our adverse childhood experience rating from the Kaiser scale 3 years ago was 4 out of 10 students experienced it. In Sonoma County, we are now 6 out of 10 students have experienced, and that was before the pandemic. So can you imagine? Everybody will get something on their scorecard for this, and it will just push us to that. So Sheldon, we have 2 issues: the loss of academic learning, but the emotional trauma that students are going through.
I have a question.
Yes.
When
Ellen.
you mentioned waivers, and I was wondering if those waivers extend to childcare.
You mean state subsidized childcare?
Pardon?
State subsidized childcare?
No. You talked about the waivers that elementary schools could apply for.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if those waivers, if one could apply for a waiver to be able to offer childcare at a school site.
Oh,
Not necessarily.
you could do it this way, and I'll be very careful. We don't want to call it childcare because there are licensing requirements for childcare. If you wish to offer utilizing your employee group, let's say your paraprofessionals, and you want to offer employee support for their children while they're in their classroom teaching, that's an option you might want to look at. But you would need to call it something other than a child care program. You would do an employee support program where you're offering them so they could be in their classrooms teaching. Remember, their kids have to go to school too, but a lot of them are too young to stay home unattended.
What
So
about?
You could use your facilities in that way for support for your own employees.
But not for the community
At large, no, you could not, because then you would be running a licensed program and you'd be moving. See, that's what you have to go through licensing. And may I remind you, our facilities, the standard classroom construction is designed for students under the Field Act. Childcare has, I think it's Title 22, Chris probably knows, Title 22, but I think most of those rules are very stringent, and they have, like, you don't have the right toilet facilities, you don't have all those other particulars. I mean, sitting on a toilet for a child is different than for the school setting.
I have a question related to what Ellen, I'm sorry, Chris, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to clarify, but go ahead,
Okay,
Joanna.
go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, we actually operate childcare. We
In
actually
one of your
operate some
facilities.
childcare programs on our facilities, and we actually have lots of partners that we partner with that also operate childcare programs. So I think that there may be a way that we could partner with them. But Steve's right. There are potentially licensing requirements, et cetera.
They have the license. You, as Chris is right, you could make a community partnership, but they must have the space and they have to have the license. You have to use you could use their license.
So I guess related to what Ellen's asking, it sounds like we can provide for employees. Are there any options, like additional funds or anything?
No, there's no additional funds, but are you not paying your paraprofessionals currently? They're currently in your budget and you're currently being funded from the state. So if you look at that, and you're using them as a resource. Now you may not need all of them, and you may reduce the size and scope of the number you need, but you can use some of your pre-existing staff. Remember, through all of this, you have to run nutrition programs as a prerequisite to serve the community. So you can't lay off the nutrition staff, and you must also provide a custodial cleaning. So the custodial staff is exempted from being laid off. So there's a variety of requirements you have to still provide to the community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nadia Flanagan raised her hand. Could somebody unmute her?
Think I did.
Do you want to, well, if you're gonna, before you do that, you're gonna want to see how many people would like to comment on this particular item related to COVID and basically what Dr. Harrington covered. We need to
Right
know
now,
how
I
many there
see
are.
2 hands up. Nadia Flanagan and Sarah Sebastian. So I will unmute Nadia first and let her ask her question. I think I can unmute you. Nadia, you're unmuted.
Okay, hi. I had a question about siblings in schools. Just wondering, I have 2 kids that are going to be in elementary school, and wondering if one classroom closes, does the classroom close for my other sibling as well, since they are sharing a home?
Well, the tracer would first of all, it would be determined by the tracing team from the county health department. They would have to show that your child would have to, let's say the child was in the room and the child did, for tracing purposes, most people don't know the standard for tracing is you have to have had less than 6 feet contact and you had to have contact greater than 15 minutes. So they will not trace you if you are 6 feet apart and you didn't have, and your child did not have greater than 50, let's say he didn't play with that student.
Right.
They were in the same classroom, but they didn't have any interaction greater than 15 minutes. So therefore, they probably wouldn't even trace him.
Okay, so it's not automatic, but it's
not
possible
automatic.
if the tracing lines up. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, I'm unmuting you. If it will let me do it.
Hi there, Dr. Harrington. Thank you for coming to our meeting.
You're welcome.
I have a question in regards to being able to serve those families with the highest needs in regards to scaffolding and creating a support system for those who have families that are single parent families or families that are working who are not able to, or special needs, families who are not able to facilitate the learning, the distance learning for their students. And I'm curious as to what the state, the county, and the local districts can do to support those students in particular. And I'm particularly curious about small cohorts on campus and whether or not there could be partnerships with different organizations that already work within the district, such as in Petaluma, for example, Mentor Me or other programs that could come on to support those families that have the highest needs.
Well, I think the health department will want you to be very careful about allowing people on campus, because every time you add groups, you're increasing the cohort exposure. And many of those people of the, let's say, Schools of Hope and Mentor Me are in my age group, and therefore they're at a risk factor. So those are some things that have to be considered, and district liability issues have to be considered. So those are some factors the board has to consider when they look at those programs. I'm not saying they can't be done. The thing is, when you talk about reopening your school, and I don't know what your local plan looks like, because that's a local issue that they've been working on, they may want to do their service groups to their EL students and their special ed students first. When your first step to move off of distance learning might be, let's look at serving our small populations first. Let's try that out and get them started. So that's an option, because I believe those students, that gets back to Sheldon's question, some of those students have had the greatest learning loss. And those are the students we should try to phase into the program first. But it's whatever your local plan is that you're stakeholder group is developing with Gary and your ed services staff. Those are the things. You can have partnerships, boys club, boys and girls club, YMCA. Those are your licensed childcare providers. They're all fingerprinted. They have all gone through the COVID trainings. So rather than bring a new group in, try to build upon the capacity of the groups you have. And it can be that you use your paraprofessionals in a different manner than what they've been traditionally been used for. Like your yard duties and all those people can come together, provide other services. So it's a matter of rethinking some of that. But your question was, I believe, and I support you, the whole concept of bringing the neediest student populations in first. They need more social contact. They need more coaching, academic encouragement. I hope I'm addressing your question.
Liz Chamberlain, if someone could please unmute her.
Hi, thank you. I think I'm on mute now.
Yes.
Well, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for taking the time to listen to us. And I appreciate the presentation and everyone's work under really challenging conditions to adapt. And my question was, I have currently 3 kids in Petaluma City Schools, and I and my husband are thrust into remote overnight work, kind of like everybody else has been here. And it's made me really think about access and internet access and things like that. And I looked at the state guidelines myself, and they are a little bit hard to interpret. My understanding was that they don't require a synchronous live instruction option. It just has to be offered, but students can also engage other ways. And I know my own internet can barely support my husband and I at the same time on Zoom. And I'm thinking about 5 of us on Zoom from 8 to noon every day. And thinking of this following up with Sarah's question as well as kind of an equity and access issue for all my kids' friends that really, it would be challenging to be remote and be required to attend live instruction at a specific time. So I was wondering if you could clarify a little bit, what are the state rules on the live instruction that must be offered, a live interaction that must be offered, and how can we, or how are the schools thinking about offering flexibility to help us cope with this distance learning model, which I support, and I support all that you're doing here. But
Well,
I'm wondering.
and let me tell you that the criteria for the distance learning model came out of state PTA, parent advocacy groups, and civil rights groups, because they felt the neediest students were being passed over in a lot of this. Just posting lessons online is not instruction, and it's engagement. So that's what the criteria factor is. What I would tell you is that we do have, I have a question that I've circulated to the superintendents, that we need to look at equity as it relates to bandwidth. You can have the equipment, but you may not have the bandwidth. Then some of our parents are, as it deals, not maybe in your situation, but some families don't have the ability to pay for that type of bandwidth. So then we have a whole nother issue as it deals with equity and access. And so in the HEROES Act, there is money provided to increase districts' abilities, to increase their bandwidth, and provide options to families, a sort of an offset option with vendors to provide that, subsidize that a little bit. So there is going to be some of that if the HEROES Act, at least it's in the proposed legislation. Legislation goes through a multiple set of steps, but that's what's in the current set, is to provide district flexibility to offset the increased costs, to provide increased bandwidth where possible, and equipment. So I can't commit your district to this, and I can't commit the state to this, but the thing is, there needs to be an evaluation of equity as it relates to bandwidth, because not all households come equipped. And I use the example of 2 working parents who need to use the bandwidth for livelihood, and then you're trying to put the students on that same bandwidth. And so we have another issue. And then of course, where do we develop hotspots so that we can have that? It could be at a boys and girls club, and that's where their engagement is. So you need to look at that as it relates to childcare too. But that's an issue that we haven't dealt with yet. And I really don't have a solid answer for you, because it's a valid point that needs to be addressed.
DM.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, everybody. I have two questions. One, do you have any advice for, PTAs and other fundraising organizations, other parent groups that regarding the funding piece specifically, and what might be expected of some of those groups moving forward if we run into funding issues? And two, has there been any consideration for outdoor classrooms?
Well, you have to be careful. California didn't waive the Field Act. The Field Act is the standard which we have students are supposed to have instruction in earthquake facilities. So we could do marching band, I guess, outside, and we could say that's instruction, but you have to be careful of where you put students and gathering. Now, you may want gathering points on campus for outside instruction, science walks, nature walks, all those type of things. So it's actually a more ideal situation to teach outside. And if you can configure your days for that, that's ideal. But you can't make this, of the 230 minutes, you have to can't put all of it outside. Unfortunately, you need to provide some structured environment. So it's a matter of balance.
Okay. And then funding? Any
Funding
advice?
for your funding question is related to what?
PTA funding, fundraising.
PTA fundraisers, I would look at this whole issue about, might be PTA might want to develop a partnership with a service agency like, I'm not saying Comcast, but at Comcast and Xfinity, about providing, doing some, and with your foundation also, but doing something that allows families that need to increase their bandwidth, sort of an opportunity program, and use that, and then because you're really helping the whole group at that time and community. But and Comcast might want to join in with the PTA in its fundraiser for something, because it builds a long-term relationship. So looking at those type of vendors, and I'm sure there are other AT&T and others that are doing that, but building a partnership situation.
Okay, Lee Boyce, you're next.
Ellen, before Lee starts, could I just get the full name of the last speaker? All I could see was DM, the initials.
I don't know if she's muted or not. Maybe
Okay.
DM, maybe if you could put your name in the
I thought I
chat.
unmuted her. Oops. It won't let me unmute her. I guess I'm not the co-host.
Okay, so DM, if you could put your name in the chat, then that would be perfect. Okay, Lee, you're on. It's not letting me.
The co-host needs to unmute Lee.
Okay, well, Lee's unmuted. Lee, are you there? Lee? Are you there? You're unmuted. Okay, we'll come back.
Should we go to Sarah while we're waiting
Yes.
for Lee?
Yeah, we'll go to Sarah. I don't want to massacre your last name.
It's Obaj. I just had, yeah, thank you. I just had one quick thing. First, you asked her to, whoever DM is, to leave their name in chat. But
I almost failed.
So we can't do anything with chat, at least not on my end. And then I just wanted to, I was looking at the agenda, and the point for public comment is coming next, or was that a part of this section right here?
No, it's coming next.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm down for now and then come back.
Okay, Maureen Highland.
Hey, Ellen, sorry, I just got unmuted. I can't chat. So DM is Dulcie Moore.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to Maureen Highland. Maureen, you are unmuted.
Actually, now that you clarified, I'll wait for the public comment because I was just going to update you on what we're doing for technology and social emotional programs. So
awesome. I can't wait to hear that.
I think we're ready to move on to the next item, Al.
Because I don't see any more hands.
Yeah, comments from public.
Thank you, Dr. Harrington.
You're welcome, and I wish you the best as you try to deal through, as a policy group, it's very challenging.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That was wonderful.
Thanks, Steve.
Really clear. Thank you.
Okay, before we move on to public comment, I have something I need to read. Under Government Code Section 54954, members of the public have the right to address the governing board on any items of interest, providing it relates to the subject matter jurisdiction of the school district. While Government Code allows speakers to criticize the district's policies, procedures, programs, services, and/or employees, the district does have a policy specific to complaint against employees. Should comments from the public pertain to a specific district employee, the board requests that the complaint first be submitted in writing to the employee's immediate supervisor for investigation. If the comment is about something that is not on the agenda, it will be heard only during the public comment on non-agendized items, period, which is coming up next. Once that part of the meeting is over, comments will only be taken on agenda items during the discussion of those items. The board values public comment, and although we cannot take action or discuss items not on the agenda, we listen carefully, we take notes, and we appreciate input from the public. Public comments are subject to 4-minute per person limit or a 20-minute limit per subject matter. When I call for public comment, participants who wish to speak can raise their hand. Please do not raise your hand to speak until instructed to do so. Wait for the moderator to call your name and turn on your microphone. Make sure to unmute your audio and state your first and last name for the record, and then you may make your comment. So I am officially opening public comment.
Before we start, I think we got some new participants between when I mentioned how to raise your hand the first time. So really quick, if anyone is new and does not know how to raise your hand, if you are using the web browser version or on your computer or smartphone, near the bottom, and you may need to move your mouse to see it, you should see participants. Clicking on that should give you the option to raise hand. It should either have a little hand icon or say the words raise hand. And if you are on a phone, you can just press *9 and that will allow you to raise your hand.
Thank you, Ashley. Okay, so we are going to start public comment with Sarah. And
okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for holding this meeting and for being able to listen to us. And my name is Sarah Obaj, and I teach English at Casa Grande High School. And I'm also a member of the Distance Learning Committee that we have for the district, and I am on all 4 subcommittees for the Distance Learning Committee in general.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I have a statement that I'd like to read and a request of the board. So thank you for taking the time to hear this. So as a member of the Distance Learning Committee and a member of every subcommittee on the distance learning team, I can say that the distance learning modality is the only structure that will allow us to efficiently and effectively provide the most rigorous, thorough, and engaging curriculum possible given this unprecedented time during the COVID pandemic. In a recent blog post by educator Chris Jones, published on June 4th, he relays his experience in a private school that was able to actually put into practice the distance learning model. And what he reveals is not unexpected, but it is something that we should take very seriously. He says unequivocally that it didn't work. In short, the ability for a teacher to connect with their class and, more importantly, read their class for understanding, for interest, and for general connectedness was completely lost, given the restrictions and regulations that his school was forced to adhere to. He says, quote, "Masks hide not only bad things, but good things. They very nearly completely disconnected me from the students in front of me. They sat obediently, took notes obediently, watched me come in and watched me go out. And while the students did, and that was an end quote, while the students did exactly as asked during the first week, quote, by the second week, some kids wore their masks with noses exposed. They never took them off all the way, which impressed the socks off me, but they were clearly over the whole mask thing. Mask protocol would not have made it a full month. End quote. Mr. Jones says clearly that this model will not work. He says, not in a private school, not in a charter school, not in a public school. It is totally, completely, utterly unworkable. Even for us, where we had the absolute right to restrict their on-campus population, it wouldn't work. And in a public school where open means open, there's no logistical way to keep the distancing the CDC rules require. Mr. Jones says that they cleaned constantly, and this too, he says, is unsustainable. His ultimate conclusion is what we in the Petaluma City Schools Distance Learning Committee have known for some time. The CDC guidelines will not work at all. And one final point he makes is this. He says, quote, teachers go to absurd lengths to engage students in the classroom because that engagement creates learning. Taking all that away, and make no mistake, the CDC guidelines take all of that away. And we might as well admit that the only reason we're sending kids to school is so that they can be penned up for hours so their parents can go back to work. We should take what Mr. Jones says very seriously. Most of us, if not all of us, on the Distance Learning Committee have realized just how disastrous this hybrid model would be for students, for families, and for teachers and staff. Just some of the requirements that will be in place, at least to some degree, based on what we have been discussing in the meetings are as follows. Masks and possible face shields for teachers. A possible barrier like a shower curtain or movable plexiglass wall will potentially be between the teacher and the students. Cohorts that in the high school will need to be split into thirds will make it incredibly difficult and challenging for teachers to administer a breadth of curriculum that they are used to and that students need. One-way hallways, ingress and egress issues, cleaning in between classes, which we have successfully figured out, which we have not yet successfully figured out how that would happen. The fact that families can opt out of distance learning even while doing the hybrid, opt out of the hybrid while to do distance learning, what makes it even more challenging for the teachers. And that doesn't even address how we would handle the issues of quarantines that would most likely happen. If one cohort is quarantined, that means the teacher is quarantined too, as are the families. And how teachers who are quarantined but still able to teach are going to be under even more pressure to try to keep their classes running smoothly while some cohorts may still be going to school. And I believe that the emotional issues that students and staff have been dealing with will only be exacerbated by the hybrid model, though we did the best that we could in the planning of this. If it is implemented, it will prove to be unsustainable. What we have found is that the only model that will, excuse me, let me back up. What we have found is that this model will not only prevent us from doing our best work, but may even prove to be more detrimental for students and staff, given all the restrictions we must adhere to. For these reasons, I am in agreement with our union that is requesting that we commit to at least the first semester to distance learning model, with the understanding that we would reevaluate the COVID situation to see if we can get back to school in a hybrid model that may have more reasonable requirements. Mr. Jones argues even beyond that, saying he does not think any school should try it and just wait until they get back basically to traditional. We all want what is best for our students, for our families, our staff, and for our community. The distance learning model only is for now the best that we can give to our students and to our families. I really appreciate your hearing me out on this issue, and I hope that you will come to the same conclusion that our union has. Committing to distance learning for at least this first semester will give us the best model to provide our students with the most rigorous, the most cohesive, and the most coherent instruction that we can provide during these highly unusual and challenging times. And I thank you very much for listening.
Sarah, I have a question, a quick question. What was the name of the person that you quoted? I'd like to read that for myself.
Absolutely. I'm happy to send you a copy of that. And his name is Chris Jones, and he's an educator in a private school. He doesn't say where, it was on his private blog, but he goes into a lot of detail about the all of the factors they took into thought, and all of the aspects that they covered. And that was his, I'll be happy to send that to you.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Is it just E. Webster?
Yes.
PET? Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Sandra, you're next. Sandra Larson.
Am I unmuted? Yes. Before we start, I just want to let you know, I got text from people once you hit the 100 limit, people couldn't get into the meeting. Just so you know, you can upgrade your Zoom. We had to do that for PFT, so everybody could get in, because you were over 100 for a while.
Okay, thank you.
One more little bite. My grandchildren are here, so if you hear a little voice, sorry. Petaluma Federation of Teachers would like to express our appreciation for the leadership the board and district administration have shown thus far during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our PFT members have been dedicated to working alongside district administrators since early spring and throughout the summer to develop the best possible educational programs for our students. It's been a summer like no other. 2 elementary sites have already begun the school year in distance learning, and the rest of our sites will soon begin distance learning instruction in August. Over the past several days, the membership of the Petaluma Federation of Teachers has voted overwhelmingly to ask the board to take the initiative to inform the community that we will begin the 2021 school year with distance learning as our instructional model and will continue as such until December 18th, 2020, when the winter break begins. We firmly believe it is the best interest of our students, families, staff, and the community to maintain distance learning through December 2020 for the following reasons. It's the best option for avoiding contagion for students, families, and staff members. It allows families and teachers to make plans based on a consistent schedule. It allows students to have stability and structure in their learning environment, knowing that the instructional model will stay the same until winter break. It allows staff members to support students academically and emotionally without added pressures of addressing the ever-changing health concerns in the physical school setting. It allows the district the time necessary to develop safe and effective hybrid models. It creates the consistency that teachers need to develop and deliver the most rigorous curriculum and the best possible learning experience to students, assured that the distance learning model will be uninterrupted throughout the semester. We firmly believe that a return to in-person learning at this time, hybrid or otherwise, would cause an increased risk of infection, thereby necessitating a return to distance learning. We hope to avoid the disruption this would present to our students, families, and staff members. Our ongoing commitment to the well-being of our students demands that we are allowed to deliver a quality educational experience to our students while keeping the community safe. We hope that you will agree. And I will send you this letter tonight, so you'll have a copy of it in writing.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Okay, Maureen.
Oh,
Hi. Hi.
Nice to see everyone. I'm glad everyone's doing well. I'm Maureen Highland from the Petaluma Educational Foundation. It's been a very informative meeting. I appreciate having Dr. Harrington update us on everything that is most likely going to change within the next few days again. So your patience is amazing. I'm just updating, and many of you know, our grant program is going to adapt this year to address the immediate needs of our schools. We have met with many of our districts and principals via Zoom and through email. So we're announcing a change to the 2021 school year grant process. It's intended to be a support for teachers and students so they can navigate the year ahead. And what they have all shared, regardless of the list of their priorities per campus, on everyone's list is social emotional learning and technology, and that is device and access. So very much along the things that were discussed this evening. So we will focus just on these two areas for funding this year. We are adjusting the amount that schools can ask for from 15 down to 5, and they can ask for these two focus areas. Our goal is to raise $200,000. We'll kick it off at the bash. If that is, and we plan to be successful, that means every one of the 38 schools in the community can apply for this funding. So it would be across the whole town. So we're very proud of that. We look forward to reporting some success on that. And we are working with partners for volume funding and things like that, volume pricing. We are working with the individual schools. So if there's teachers on here, please check our website or let me know and we'll get you the new grant application. It was mailed out a few weeks ago. And we do want to know what the schools want in advance so we can have some direct support for certain campuses. So that was my update. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much, especially, I mean, you saw everything in Dr. Harrington's thing about deferred payments and how that's going to affect us. So PEF is even more valuable than usual. So thank you, Maureen, and everyone at PEF for taking
I
care of
have
our
a
students.
question about your bash. Is that going to be on Zoom, or how are you going to do that?
It's actually going to be a live stream broadcast online, on multiple social media platforms. So we'll do it in a studio over in Sonoma, and you'll be able to see lots of different people. We're going to be having some educators and superintendents send a message as well. We'll do a live auction. We will name the winners of our restaurant raffle that we launched today. And we will do a virtual paddle race for From the Future for these 2 focus areas of funding.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for everything you're doing.
Fabulous, thank you.
Okay, Linda Judah.
Hi, thank you. So I wanted to thank everyone again. This has been a really interesting and informative meeting. I would like to say that I want to thank Sarah Obaj for her comments, and I concur with much of what she said. I'd also like to say that I am in agreement with the PFT findings, that being recommending that we go completely distance learning. I would like to thank the committee that has been working hard, very hard, on coming up with a plan for instruction for the fall. I know that there are a lot of great people putting in a lot of time to address this challenging task. I would like to ask this committee and the school board to make special consideration for students of essential workers and low-income students. I know from personal experience as a PHS teacher this last spring that I had a number of students who during distance learning were given the responsibility of caring for younger siblings and cousins as their parents were working outside of the home. These students faced an extra burden when trying to complete their own assignments. In addition, I had other students who were working full-time during distance learning in order to support their households. This as well places an extra burden on these students. If and when we're able to phase back to campus instruction, these students should be given first priority. In addition, I would like our district to consider offering on-campus supervised homerooms of sorts for students of essential workers beginning in August. And I know when Superintendent Harrington was talking, he was saying we had to be very careful about what we called that because we could get into issues if we call it childcare. But perhaps if they were, if those students who absolutely need some place to be could be put in something like a homeroom, or call it a special class that they have to attend, maybe we can work it that way. So homerooms like that would be formed from family and or neighbor groups so that students of essential workers have a safe supervised space with good Wi-Fi in which to do their distance learning work. And finally, I would caution also against punitive measures for students who are unable to regularly attend online classes or complete assignments. So with a lot of the new requirements for the rigor of the classes being in line, I would just hate to see something happen like happened recently in Michigan, where a student was actually jailed for not completing her distance learning assignments. So rather, these behaviors should trigger increased support rather than punishment. We must make every effort to support low-income students and students of essential workers so as to address systemic racism rather than contribute to further oppression. So I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sheila Morrissey. Oh, yeah. You're unmuted, Sheila.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My name is Sheila Morrissey, and I'm a parent of 3 children who graduated from CASA and 1 who is still there. I would like to share excerpts from some of the posts on the Dear Casa Grande and Dear Petaluma High Instagram pages. I would also suggest that each member of the community read the stories for themselves. One from a Petaluma High School student says it's just difficult to go to a school where they say everyone is welcome, when that's absolutely not true. I'm Hispanic and I experience racism on a day-to-day basis. And from a CASA student, homophobic slurs are a part of everyday language for a majority of students at CASA. Some of these stories were told by current students. Other stories tell of events that left impacts on the victims for decades. Still others express gratitude for finally having a place to be heard and validated. Racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQ+, rape culture, these are problems that have existed in our schools and still exist today. There can be no denial that these issues exist here. No more minimizing of the effect that these interactions have on students. No more protection of guilty parties by minimizing their actions or claiming that they didn't mean to be racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, etc. These are our children in our school, in our town, sharing some of the worst moments in their lives. It is evident that our children do not feel safe in our schools. I believe that the Petaluma School District needs to start listening to students and alumni and stop listing all the things that they think they are doing right. Listening circles like those facilitated by the North Bay Organizing Project for the town should be the starting point, in my opinion. I would hope to see some concrete actions being taken across the district as a result of actively listening to the community. These actions need to be driven by the voices of the marginalized community members. However, if all we do is listen to stories without changing the status quo, then we will be re-traumatizing those who are brave enough to come forward. We need to recognize that our school systems are built on a framework of white supremacy that needs to be dismantled so that we can have true equity for all students. Until we face the truth, we will not have change. It is time for less talking, more listening, and more action. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. Lee Boyce. Hi, Lee, you're unmuted. Lee? Maybe she went bye-bye.
Okay.
We'll move on to Sarah Andropoulos. Let me see.
Yes.
Sarah, you're muted.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I am a member of Petaluma Tide North Bay LGBTQI families, and kind of echoing what Sheila was just describing, I wanted to submit this public comment to request that PCS participate in listening circles to receive direct input from BIPOC and other marginalized community members, similar to what was recently hosted via Zoom by Petaluma Blacks for Community Development, North Bay Organizing Project, and Indivisible Petaluma regarding the topic there was racism and interactions with police in Petaluma. In which provided a safe forum for BIPOC and Petaluma to provide collective feedback and recommend specific actions for the Petaluma Mayor and City Council. And Petaluma Tide was also a co-sponsor of this event. Public institutions in Petaluma, including PCS, do need to proactively take part in community discussions and seek out direct input and guidance from BIPOC and other groups that historically experience systemic inequities, in this case, educational inequities, with the goal of developing policy in a collaborative manner that directly addresses the needs of the most impacted communities. These listening circles should be hosted and facilitated by community organizations representing BIPOC and other marginalized groups and centered on the voices and experiences of those communities, and I think should occur as soon as it would be possible. And then just, I guess, echoing many of the earlier sort of comments that have been made, not to, repeat too much, but as the district continues, forming the return to school plans and grappling with the really difficult, issues and questions there, it's essential for the district to prioritize developing, creative solutions to meet the needs of the students most impacted by the challenging but necessary distance learning model, specifically for families with working parents and who rely on being able to bring their children to school during the day so they can go to work and support their families, which are often overwhelmingly families with the greatest level of socioeconomic need. In the PCS report to the California Department of Education that was submitted at the end of the 2019-2020 school year regarding the ways that the district was meeting the needs of various student populations, including English language learners, foster youth, and low-income students. During the pandemic, the district indicated it hadn't been able to provide student supervision during school hours, under the distance learning approach. And so as others have expressed here, I just want to say that the new school year just needs to be different, and students whose parents have no choice but to report to work to support their families should be afforded a safe and supervised space in which they can meaningfully participate in distance learning. And it's just a time to develop new solutions during this time of unprecedented need for working and single parent families, students with disabilities, and other students who experience the highest rates of educational inequities.
Thank you, Sarah. And finally, we have Ms. Smith.
Okay, I'm reading for Lee Boyce, who doesn't seem to be able to get a microphone to work.
Thank you.
Okay. So Lee Boyce says, she sent me her thing. Hello, my name is Lee Boyce and I teach chemistry at PHS. After hearing Dr. Harrington, my message feels even more important. I would like to ask the board to consider the letter from the union about making a decision regarding the length of time Petaluma City Schools will stay on distance learning. At the moment, there's no option about how we will go back, as Sonoma County is on the watch list and cannot bring students back until Sonoma County has been off the monitoring list for 14 days. I want to address what bringing students back really means, because I would love to be in the classroom. However, in my 42 years of teaching, if someone had told me that I could teach, but with the restrictions that I not walk around my room, not get within 6 feet of my students, and I could not see their faces and be able to read their faces in response to my words, I would have laughed. Now I am crying because under these conditions, I cannot do my best work. This model is so limiting that I feel I can do a much better job working remotely with faces I can see and whole classes having more content time. What will improve my ability to deliver quality, rigorous instruction is the knowledge that I can plan for a consistent model all semester. The idea that we will be in and out of distance learning or changing the cohort number does not allow me to plan for a great science course. Dr. Harrington referred to this as the yo-yo effect. Oh, and did I mention, I am one of the teachers who will lose my ability to do labs and hands-on work, and that will be very sad, and even with the hybrid model. I will not be able to do lab because of the safety of cleaning all lab equipment between students, the lack of space to do lab with even 1/3 of my class that can fit with social distance, and the fact that masks could absorb chemical fumes, making it unsafe to wear them. I hope that the board will direct our superintendent to agree to a decision that PCS stay on distance learning for the first semester so that our teachers can plan and move forward in preparing a rigorous curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our public comment.
Yeah, I don't see any more hands, so we will move on to report on activities and correspondence of school board members. A lot of us have been sitting in on, we went to CHIPA, we've done workshops with Dr. Harrington, budgeting workshops with members of the legislature. Is there anything I'm leaving out?
I did a PFT executive council meeting. There was a webinar about outdoor learning initiatives that was given through the, I believe, the Lawrence Hall of Science.
Ooh, that must have been good.
Yeah.
I wish I would have known about that one.
I know it. Anyway, and then there was another one. I think I sent it out to you. The CTE Foundation and Cradle to Career sponsored a town hall about reopening schools, the coronavirus, and social justice. And it had Mike McGuire, California Superintendent of Instruction, Tony Thurman, and Dr. Harrington. And it was
it's a good one. I saw.
Did you see that one?
Yes.
Yeah. a lot of the issues that we're talking about equity and things like that, definitely the health of a community, and how that impacts education. Anyway.
All the budget ones are just super depressing. I'm not going to add
I've
an
sat on a couple.
Chris would be so proud of us and how much we're learning about budgets.
Okay, moving on. Approval of consent agenda by consolidated motion. Do I have a motion and a second? Was that you, Kim? Okay. You guys are kind of cutting in and out, but anyway. So is there anything on here that people wish to discuss before we vote?
Well, I had a question and Chris answered it. I appreciate that. It was about the $500,000. It sounds like it's for the refresh for the 7th and 8th graders. So again, back to technology. I'm grateful that we're able to provide tech for our junior high kids, actually for all the kids. So.
Yes. And thanks to PEF to help us with the kids that are struggling with that kind of stuff. Any other comments about this?
I just was wondering if maybe Cliff could, or Chris could talk about Parent Square, since we have so many parents here, about it's a communication tool. Just to kind of see what I'd like to know about it is how it's different and how it's going to get better.
Yeah,
or
so
that it's a different platform, just kind of like why you came to that, and
it's a much more thorough program. It's pretty good.
It sounds fabulous. I have no problem with that. I just thought with all these parents here, we have 82 people, that it might be nice to know how this communication tool is different.
Yeah, I can do just a quick summary, and then David's on here, and so is Amy Fidegi, who's been using it since school started, so maybe she could speak to that a little bit. But in general, one of the biggest things we heard from the feedback surveys we did with parents was the kids for the most part knew what to do, where to go for distance learning. They knew where their assignments were, how to get to them, how to log in. Parents, there was a huge gap among the parents, just not really being sure how to help support their kids because we communicated differently. Some teachers communicated weekly, the students knew how to get the information, but there wasn't necessarily a set communication each week. So we looked at, David heard about this program called Parent Square, and it's a communications platform. It takes all of our parent to teacher and teacher to parent communications, and students actually, and puts it all in one place. So parents can choose the frequency of when they receive information, either on a daily basis or on like a weekly digest, or they can also choose which methods of communication they receive the information. So the only way we can override it is like in an emergency. We need to send out something right away if there's a serious situation. But otherwise, let's say I have 3 kids in the district my kids attend. I sometimes get, I get 3 emails, 3 texts, and 3 phone calls that all say the same thing. So I don't know if any of the parents out there have the same situation, but so for example, I would get that message once, consolidated. If it's a district-wide message for kids, I would get it once. So just, it cuts down on the clutter. It creates a place where parents know this is how I get my information. If I want to receive an email each day and it brings what was, what the teachers had sent out and posted, it then comes to me that way, whether that's a text, whether that's an email, I get to choose. So it adds some flexibility for parents. And there's some other features like secure documents, being able to get signatures on like report cards and other things like that we haven't fully even opened up yet. But that's just a general synopsis. I don't know if David or Amy want to add a little bit more.
David, I'll just share from a principal perspective. We were trained, our staff was trained last Monday, so we just have a week and a day under our belt. And it is so exciting and fun for me to open up the Parent Square app, and I can see all these different reminders that the teachers are dropping right in there to their families. I feel like our communication is so important during distance learning. And I can look on here, you know, Mrs. Labakis, hooray, Seesaw's up and running on your student's iPad. This will make life so much simpler. She has a little picture in there. She has 8 parents who've commented just back to her. So giving parents that feeling that we are so accessible and we're right here for you when you need something. I've only been using it for 8 days, and as a principal, to communicate with my staff and parents and to be able to see what's happening in the classrooms has been amazing. So I'm really appreciative to the Distance Learning Committee for doing the research and moving forward with this tool. Our teachers have been, we have, I think, all but 12 families out of 475 students are already connected. So our teachers have, like, they just jumped in using it. So I feel like it's been very well received by staff, families, and admin.
That's great. I'm so glad we found something like that. Thank you. Maddie, did you have your hand up?
Thank you. I was just saying thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. Okay, any other comments before we vote on the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, great. Action items. Resolution 2021-01 of the Board of Education of the Petaluma City Elementary and Joint Union High School Districts declaring instructional method for 2020-21 school year.
I move to approve.
Do you have a second? Comments?
So this was procedural that we were recommended by the county superintendent to do. Of course, we put this on prior to Governor Newsom's announcement. So it's probably not necessary at this point. However, it's good for us to have a resolution for purposes of auditing. Our auditor, that we are being transparent, that we intend to start in a distance platform. We may, doesn't mean that we have to, we may be going into a hybrid at some point during the school year. And it's just one of those documentation things that we need to do for our auditing purposes.
Okay, any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
Oh,
okay. Pardon?
It's the only option.
I was what?
Maddie, I didn't hear you. You're kind of.
I forgot to.
Yeah, my only comment is it's the only option to keep people alive. So that's that.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. 11.1.2 District Intern Credential Request for Erin Skinner to teach grades K-2 special ed with South County Consortium for the 2020-2021 school year.
I move to accept the request.
A second.
Okay, comments? It's pretty basic.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next one, 11.1.3, District Intern Credential Request for Megan Tucker to teach grades 7 through 12 science for the 2020-2021 school year at both Petaluma Junior High and Petaluma High School.
I move to accept.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a question about this. So she's going to be teaching science at both schools. I'm unclear about that.
Yeah, so this is, I wouldn't say this is common, but we have quite a few teachers who work at 2 different sites. So typically an A day and B day service schedule.
Okay.
With this one, so I will just say, so with special ed, we've had really been struggling to find qualified candidates for special ed science. This one went through a hiring with advisory committee, and they were not able to find a fully credentialed teacher for the science position. I believe she student taught at the school, and they're very excited about her. Wanted to make an offer. So which the reason that we're doing a district intern credential on this one. We went through the process and didn't find a fully credentialed person, and she we're excited to bring her to our district, but it will be under a district intern credential.
And will that be kind of complicated for her to move between the two different schools and distance learning? No?
I don't think so. Like I said, we have quite a few teachers who go back and forth to different schools.
Okay. Yeah. Any other comments?
Yeah, Matthew, just for my own clarification, what's the difference between intern credential versus, you said that this person already did a student teaching, I presume, at a credentialing program. So what's the difference between, say, a Sonoma State credentialing program versus an internship credential?
So Sonoma State would typically, I'm not sure if it's just because she hasn't gotten her full credential yet, I believe is why. And I think she's going through a program while she's getting her credential.
It's concurrent.
Yeah, she needs more coursework.
It's concurrent.
Right. So she's getting her credential while she's teaching.
That would be me. I did.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, last one, 11.1.4, district intern credential request for Melanie Rosa to teach grades 3-4 special ed for the 2020-2021 school year with South County Consortium.
Move to accept.
Second? It's so hard to find special ed teachers.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Can she stay forever already?
Yeah.
Wondering.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, business services, 11.2.1, resolution 2021-02 of the Board of Education of the Petaluma City Elementary School District, increasing school facility fees as authorized by Ed Code Section 17620 and Government Code Section 65995.
I move to approve the resolution 2021-02.
I'll second.
We've kind of already talked about this.
I would feel more comfortable moving this one and the next one to the next meeting, just because, I mean, I didn't see it in the Argus or anywhere, and I can imagine a lot of people didn't.
Well, we advertised it in 2 different weeks. We have proof that it was out.
Oh no, I know that we legally did it, but I don't know if it's how time sensitive it is.
We can certainly move it if the board feels like they want to. It just delays the increase in the fees on any new developments. There's a 60-day clock that starts with the board's approval of the resolutions.
Okay.
So it would delay that 60-day clock by about 3 weeks.
Caitlin?
I don't feel like super strongly. I know that, like, it feels to me like usually when we have a public hearing, it's like a public hearing and then we vote on it at the next meeting. It's kind of the process.
You know, we typically the interested parties in this type of resolution are developers. We have not had one developer reach out to us saying they want to be notified or they have any kind of concerns.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a big increase. I mean, I'll vote in favor of it if we vote tonight. That's not an issue, but just in case.
I think I kind of would like to keep it on just because our financial situation is such that I'd like to start getting that money ASAP. So
I have no shed tears for developers, trust me.
So you're okay with that?
Please, especially can we retroactively tax my apartment complex?
I don't know, but anyway, all in favor of this resolution?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. And the next one, resolution 2021-03 of the Board of Education of the Petaluma Joint Union High School District, increasing school facility fees as authorized by Ed Code and Government Code.
Or move to adopt or move to accept.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, discussion, information only. Our Williams Settlement Quarterly Uniform Complaint Report for April 1st was, we get an A+.
Yay.
So we'll move on from that.
Can I ask a question on that,
Sure.
Matthew? What constitutes a complaint? I mean, I'm happy for our score, but when does any kind of discussion, get onto this list?
So Williams complaint maybe is typically around textbooks not having sufficient textbooks. I would walk through, over at McKinley, I would do a walkthrough with the committee. We'd be looking at textbooks, making sure every single student had access to their textbooks, that the facilities were in good shape. Be looking at drinking fountains, bathrooms, that sort of thing.
And a lot of times, if I may interject, a lot of times, Sheldon, it has to do with a facilities related issue. They feel like the bathrooms are not maintained in a cleanliness enough manner. And a lot of this has to do with, it's very rare when you get a facilities complaint, especially with facilities that we maintain pretty well.
Also properly credentialed employees. One of the big issues in Williams is that unfortunately, which kind of led to the Williams Act, is that schools that had more students of low socioeconomic status seem to have more situations of issues related to appropriate credentialing. And so it's a check and balance.
I mean, I guess I'm asking is, if there were one that would show up on this would be filed with what, a principal of a site or with the district, or what would it look like?
They do a visit, and then we would get a report of a non-compliance or some from the county.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
There are Williams complaint notices posted at every school site. It's part of the process. So,
and usually in every classroom too, right?
Yes, in every.
I know I had one in mine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next one, educational services, and I'm very excited about this new course proposal. It's 6 through 8 American Music History at Mary Collins Charter School, and I just want to say what excites me about it is it reflects the diversity of the American music. So it's not just the usual suspects. It covers everything, and I've heard from students that they don't find themselves represented in the curriculum, and this is an example of curriculum that I think is representative of our entire community. So yay, Cherry Valley.
Yeah.
They've been busy.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I'm here to answer questions on behalf of the teachers who presented these course proposals. If you have any for me, I'm ready and willing to answer any of those for you tonight.
Well, tell the teacher who proposed the music course that yay.
I certainly will. That's Carrie Bailey, and she had high requests for that course after she proposed it, and we're really excited to offer it to as many students who are interested in taking it this year.
Cool.
Yeah, I love the diversity of all the different classes that are proposed, and
yes,
it's exciting. It's exciting to see them in middle schools, and I personally love that they're not college prep, because oh my gosh, they're in middle school.
And that one particularly is in line with our Arts Charter. I think that to learn how to produce good quality music, you need to also appreciate the music that has come before you. So it definitely is in line with one of our charter hubs for sure.
Well, and I really like the tie-in with the history, slavery and the civil rights movement and all that. When I read that, I'm going, God, I want to take this class.
Okay. Ellen, you're welcome to join us.
Maybe I will.
Just want to share. So, not only are these, course offerings based on, interest and trying to, add some, some unique offerings to the program. This is also in response to us being in alignment with the new CalSAS credentialing back-end system verification. So in the past, some of our junior high courses were just, kind of what we call dummy codes and ARIES. They're just kind of a code that we use for anything. It may just say elective or middle grades elective. But now with the new requirements, they're making sure that every course that we teach that's single subject, that the teacher has the right credential to teach that course. So we have to, in the system, say what kind of course is this, what subject is it, And that's how they know in the back end to do it. So part of this was us coming into compliance. Part of this also was them adding, some variety to their program. So these came forward in April. We just haven't got them all the way in front of your eyes yet, but they're planning on offering all of these this school year somehow, some way in our model. So
yeah, can I take a lump the other, just kind of read all of them and then we can talk about them? So they're kind of all, because
there's 4 of them. Yeah, that sounds great, Ellen. Thank you.
Okay, so we have, these are all at Mary Collins. Maker, learning skills, which is always needed, and a lit club as Maddie, as the 2 retired English teachers. Yay.
So what would be, so how's literature club kind of, working with English, or is it different? Is it like, do they like a book club? Amy, maybe? Or Cliff? Oh, they're gone.
Amy, no, she's muted. I'm going to unmute her.
Okay, thank you. So could you ask that question again? I was trying to unmute myself, but I think I needed some support from Ashley. So what was the question, Ellen?
About
I was just wondering about the literature club and, how that's different from an English class.
Yeah.
I mean, because
Yeah.
you're basing it more on literature and literary analysis rather than, learning how to write.
Yeah,
I have a
absolutely.
question about that too, Amy, if you don't mind answering both. Like,
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this in addition to English, or is it like a separate English elective? I saw something about honors in there. What is, if you could just explain the whole thing, that'd be great.
Yeah, so it's absolutely in addition to the ELA class. It's not taking the place of it. It's really for our students who absolutely love to read literature. But what they really want to delve into is the analysis of it. And I think, right now with such a focus on social emotional, kids really learn how humans interact through reading how characters interact in a story, right? And so they start to learn higher level standards, actually. When I taught literature analysis at the high school in Pioneer, we talked a lot about indirect and direct characterization, where you can really tell a lot by somebody by how they answer a question or how they, interact with another character, as opposed to the narrator saying, and this character was a very jealous person, right? Or this character was a very, generous person. You see it through their actions. And so I think that, we're looking at analyzing literature, really analyzing human behavior and human interaction and how people connect to each other. And so it just has such a deep, rich, possibility for students beyond just learning how to, enhance their vocabulary or do basic reading comprehension. So I'm super excited about the class and am in fact going to participate in it as much as I possibly can with the students myself, because it's also my passion too. So
maybe
and I have a question about what books will you be? Will you be using a wide, diverse collection of authors? And
yeah, as a matter of fact, our first book is called Bud Not Buddy, right? It's the author of The Watsons Go to Birmingham, very kind of timely and relevant. It was a Newbery Medal Award winner. And so I obviously have a copy of it myself here at home and am reading it right now along with the students. And then, of course, we want to break the students into lit study groups so they can pursue their own passions. Elective courses really should be, student driven and allow students to explore, their own passions. But it's nice to all kind of, start with one book together so we can develop the practice, right? And then they can take hopefully those skills that they learn for literary analysis from the book that we do together into these own, little groups that kind of spin off so they can explore different genres. I'm a firm believer that if everybody reads the same thing, we have nothing to learn from each other. And so what we really need to do is we need to have children reading diversely. There's so much in the world to read, right? And if everybody kind of takes a little piece, then we have such a richer community to learn from each other. And that's what we hope to accomplish in this course.
Sounds great.
So what's the process? This is the first reading. Do we approve it at the next meeting?
Yeah, it's first reading. It says for the board to approve, but it's really for the board to read it, and we'll come back with any questions that you have at the second read.
Well, kudos to the chair.
Ultimately, it's for you to approve it.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks for the questions.
Thank you. Okay, student services. Aha, this is an interesting one. Police, sheriff, and city services on campuses.
So this one, I'm going to take it. As you remember, in the discussions that we had last month, what we talked about was just a process of continuing to build some background information about, well, how do we use police or city services, at our school sites, especially now that we're no longer utilizing school resource officers. And so we invited some of our principals to come tonight to kind of talk to you about their experience at the school site, and that's Miss Fidesi's here. We have one of our APs, Will Ortlinghouse, is here from Kenilworth. I believe Kelly Chris is here. And Mr. Morey, Justin Morey from Petaluma High School. And so I'm gonna leave it to them, and they're gonna kind of just chat with the board and give you a kind of a sense of their interactions.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share tonight. I have a unique opportunity being at Pengrove, which this is hard to believe for those of you who I haven't known for that long. I'm starting my 9th year there. So in those 9 years, the location of Pengrove is actually that I get to work with 5 agencies pretty frequently. So we're in the sheriff jurisdiction, but our roads are maintained by the California Highway Patrol. So if I need help in the street, it's CHP, and if I need help on campus, it's the sheriff. And then also we have 50% of our students who come from Cotati Runner Park. 2 departments there with 2 different police departments who I call on pretty frequently to do well checks when I have some concerns about students. Maybe we haven't seen a student in a couple days, the family's not responding to our emails and calls, and I have some concerns. And so those officers will go out and check on families. And you never know what information you'll hear back. And I always get a call back pretty immediately letting me know about the safety of my students, which I really appreciate, because by the time you call the police about a student, you're pretty concerned. We, as the elementary team, we rely on our law enforcement agencies for just overall campus safety, for reviewing our emergency plans on our sites. And at Pengrove, the last couple years, I've had some sheriff deputies show up within the first couple of weeks of the school year to just walk the campus with me and talk through some different scenarios in case we were to be in a lockdown scenario or an active shooter situation. So obviously that being probably my least favorite topic as a principal, it's been comforting to know that they're thinking about that too, and that we would have a plan together to protect the safety of all on campus. Other than that, I have a recent fun thing to share with you guys. Besides having some different police officers and sheriff deputies out on campus for our kindergarten career day, we did our 6th grade promotion via drive-in style. And I didn't really tell Gary and many people about this because I just, I sometimes every now and then want to not ask permission if I just think we're following all the rules and he's going to celebrate it. So I called up a few Pengrove parents who are actually sheriff deputies, asked if they would close down Main Street of Pengrove for a little bit so that our 6th graders could have a true celebration. So after we did our promotion over the car radios, the sheriff department closed down the street for us, and the kids got to just parade down, and they felt pretty special that they stopped all of that big action that happens in the little town of Pengrove. So those are just some recent perspectives from the elementary. Unfortunately, we have had to call on law enforcement, as I'm sure some of my colleagues will share, for some safety concerns, some 5150s when we're concerned about the mental health of students. and perhaps a student running off campus. So always appreciative to get some support when something passes my expertise.
Thank you.
Will you going next?
Sure.
He's muted.
There we go. Now I'm unmuted. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you guys. On the junior high, there's only a couple times when law enforcement is ever really involved, and that is if there's a report of self-harm. At some point in time, we need to contact law enforcement because we're concerned that somebody is harming themselves to that point. And then the other time is reported child abuse. In those situations, that's when we're dealing with law enforcement. In the last couple of years, the school resource officer has been on our site, I don't know, a handful of times at most. And when he's been out there, he's a coach in the community. And so it's been very good. The kids come up and, they say hi and things like that. But in terms of involving the law enforcement, it's really, like I said, for self-harm and for child abuse. The other incident that comes to mind is we had a dance back in the fall, and we had lots of, we couldn't tell if they were kids or adults, but trying to crash the junior high dance. And so the principal and myself are trying to run around and monitor all of Kenilworth. And so at that point in time, we did call PPD, and they came out in their cars and kind of shoot away the kids. And then the last time is in the rare situations where we have a student suspended multiple times for drugs. And at that point in time, when we might have to involve law enforcement and they're citing the student. But otherwise, the law enforcement presence has really been limited to the rare times when the SRO is on campus. Just
I have a question.
Saying hi to the kids. Yeah. Ellen.
When you're talking about child abuse, isn't that CPS rather than a police officer? And I'm just wondering if there's someone else that can be called when a kid is self-harming other than a cop.
Right. Well, and we do. We have to report. We're mandated reporters, and we do go through those channels. But if there's a situation where we're fearful of immediate harm, if it's coming to the point where it's in danger right now, then we need to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Kelly Chris from Petaluma Junior High School principal, and I'd like just to piggyback on Kenilworth. I want to say some of the positive things that we have dealt with on our campus. One of the things is we had a lot of students who were riding their bikes and their scooters and did not have helmets, and the police department came and delivered helmets to those students, which was a great resource for us, and it was really nice to have that community bond with them. The other thing is when we had Danny Miller as our SRO, and even after he wasn't our SRO, he would still show up and check in on the kids, come out and hang out with me during pickup after school. If you've ever been at Petaluma Junior High School for pickup, it's a disaster just because of our one way in and one way out. But kids are always asking him for stickers, like the metal stickers that say PPD on it. So I really feel that they have a really positive presence, and I appreciate the fact that they do that community outreach. So when they do have to come on campus for those things like self-harm or they're in danger, that they're not scared of PPD.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. And so at the high school, my experience this year with PPD has really only been obviously this 1 year, but overall it's been very positive, and do appreciate the community aspect that they bring. I will say first semester, just like the others have said, our SRO, Danny Miller, was really focused on being a part of the community. I remember at the beginning of the year, he came to me and said, hey, do you have a problem with me going to various club meetings at lunch so that students get to see me more than just the uniform? And I know that he did actually follow up on that because he and I actually visited a couple clubs together. And so that was a great community building aspect for him. It was unfortunate that we lost that position at the semester, but he still is available for input and advice if we need it. We use them at our Friday night football games, more as a support and a presence, once again, to be part of the community. They actually never really needed to engage in anything. administrators handled anything that was going on. And sometimes they just provided us some support as we were taking funds, like gate funds, back to the safe. Other than that, we had a situation, they're very focused obviously on community safety. When we had the situation with the barber shop down the street where the gentleman barricaded himself inside, Petaluma Police Department reached out to us. They ended up talking to me. I actually ended up having conversations with Lieutenant Lyons a couple times, and he and I coordinated how we were going to, what we were communicating to our community, what direction we were going to encourage people to go in order to maintain their safety, and then we coordinated where he would have people, and I coordinated where I would have my staff in terms of helping students release. So overall, my experience this year has been very positive. We do see them as a community resource. And actually, just like Will mentioned, the only time we really call them is when we have students who are in crisis and potentially need to be brought to one of the crisis units, and they're the ones who can do that. And so they really continue to support us for those students who might be in some sort of emotional distress.
Thank you.
And Justin, does the district or the campus pay for anything revolving sporting events or any of that kind of oversight or involvement?
To be honest with you, I'd have to check. In terms of the football games, we don't. They weren't at any other athletic events.
Yeah.
But I'd have to check on that. I didn't actually look at that myself. And when they were there, sometimes it would be one officer, sometimes it would be two. And once again, they were just there as a community support.
So I have a question. So when you have had incidents of like impropriety or, if there's been an issue with the police on campus, how is that reported either to the district or to the police department?
Who was that directed to?
Anyone?
Well, I mean, just in general, if we have police on campus, we do generally notify the district office so that they are aware. If we are in need of police support, generally I have called Officer Miller directly because he's usually the person, since he already has a relationship with the schools, that he comes to us. So usually we'll speak to him. Sometimes we'll call dispatch, and if he's unavailable, somebody else will come out.
Sorry, I was more regarding like if a parent or a student had an issue with one of the police officers who had responded, or if there was like a teacher or a counselor or someone who had an issue, like how was that handled?
Oh, you mean if there was an issue with a police response?
Uh-huh.
I have not had that experience this year, so I can't speak to that.
Joanna, I can
either.
speak to, oh, sorry, go ahead, whoever was jumping in.
I haven't had that experience either, so I don't know.
I haven't, luckily at the elementary level, typically it's a child who runs faster than I can, and I need help just down on Adobe Road. So I haven't had any of those experiences. In one instance where we had a 5150, you could just tell that the family was nervous and their child's going to be transported off of campus. And the sheriff department actually gave a couple different ideas and opportunities. And actually in two instances, one, a parent rode with the child. They were escorted in the sheriff car. That was what the family opted for. And then another time I got to ride in an ambulance with a student to Kaiser. And I felt, you never know what you're going to get when you ask. And I felt so grateful. Actually, the school psychologist and I were able to ride with that student via ambulance. And that was a decision that that all law enforcement and the medical team on staff determined would be safe. So those are the only two instances that I have.
Okay.
So could I follow up?
I mean, I was at the list. No, go ahead, Maddie. Go ahead.
No. You go ahead. It's your question.
Well, because I attended the listening circles on Saturday, and there were, people discussing their different experiences. I mean, I've had my own when I worked at Kenilworth, where I had to report to the district and to the police department. So I didn't know, like, if there's new reporting procedures, if anyone here is on the Zoom who's had an issue, like, I don't know, like
that-
how those need to be recorded.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Was, if you don't, if the administrators, is there no policy for this? Is there no procedure for, if you do, you may not have experienced a complaint, but if one comes up, what is the procedure? Is it
Yes.
not?
Yeah, I've been told two different things at the time.
Yeah, I can answer that procedurally. You know, I haven't had experience with someone having a specific complaint, but since we're now two separate entities, you know, we no longer have a school resource officer. Anything that, you know, we have our complaint procedure within the district, and someone would certainly be welcome to file with myself or with Matthew Harris if they had an issue. So it would first go to the site administrator, who could then pass it along to us. And then we would work in conjunction with the police department to pass along any concerns they had. We would also encourage the family to also additionally file separately with the police department so that they can use their system. So I would see it as a both ends, since, you know, the police officer was on our campus. It's something we can investigate as what that interaction was from our end. And we would encourage a family to file with the police department, because that's something the police department can investigate within their own personnel.
Okay, thank you. And then also, again, back to the listening circles we attended, and it came up during public comment. I'm just wondering if any of you have had any feedback from families of color or families of special ed students or English language learners, ones who feel more marginalized by police. Like, how do they feel about their presence? Any experiences they've had that you can relay back?
I'll tell you, Joanna, the group that I've actually talked with the most has been our law enforcement families, in realizing the gap that some students don't feel connected to law enforcement. And so actually, in, you know, just putting it out there and saying, like, as a representative of the community, we all should be doing everything that we can to build bridges and feel like when you walk on campus, whether it's me, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a police officer, whether it's, you know, someone's parent who has a different job, like, we want kids to see that person as someone who they feel safe with. And so the biggest group that I have talked with, and we're coming off of summer, so it's tricky because a lot of these things transpired when we were out of school. I'm just now getting my hands on a lot of parents, but I have actually been pretty vocal about encouraging people to, instead of getting mad and holding things in, well, so what are you doing about it to make our Pengrove campus feel very safe and very healthy and very welcoming to every single person? So that's I've had, you know, lots of individual conversations with other families about what will be talked about when we come back from school. And so, like I said, the focus being on distance learning right now, it's an interesting time coming with so many things going on.
So then what will be talked about when school comes back, alluding to whatever you've been talking to those law enforcement parents about?
So just like within any anything that's going on in the world, is that with, you know, when we're talking about kindergartners and first graders, and we really let a lot of them, a lot of the students guide those conversations that are outside of the curriculum. So, you know, during the distance learning committee meetings, we've established our key standards that every grade level is talking about. That being said, we had a situation last year at Pengrove where a student in one of our first grade classes was talking about going to camp with a person named Phoenix. And Phoenix was born one gender and now is representing himself or herself. It's been like almost a year since I read the book, in a different way. And the teacher was like, oh my gosh, the kids were starting to ask questions. The teacher said, I actually have that book, and was able to pull the book out and share it with the class in a read aloud. So it came up organically amongst the kids, and the teacher luckily had that on hand thanks to our PEF grant that we got to work on making our libraries more inclusive. And so that's just one example of how, you know, when you're a lot of our students are sheltered at the elementary level from this. So we stick to the, you know, to the standards and guide those conversations as they come up.
think one of the things that we're looking at is we're going to, when we meet, as we start our Circle Up training, is to also kind of infuse some of the things that are happening around us, not only in Petaluma, but in the greater United States. And what impact does that have on our students? Because clearly there's an image that a uniform projects now, and is always for some students, but even more so now with everything that's been taking place. If students are going to react differently to that very same situation. And we haven't had that conversation yet, as an administrative team, but we certainly are at our first leadership training is an understanding of what our experiences are may be very, very different than what our students' experiences are at. And I can tell you just from my own experiences have been, as a site administrator, we're very positive with the police department, with the exception of 2 situations. And in those 2 situations, I had to take the lead and control. This is my school. We will not do things that way. And so, there are always going to be those. One of the things that we never want to lose control over is it's our responsibility to protect our kids.
Yeah. And I want principals to know that and feel that and know that the district will support you in that.
Right. So we will be making that part of our focus area for this year, is talking a little bit about our truths and what we have seen, and I have an opportunity to share some of the warning signs that people should look for. One of the challenges that we have, and it's not just related to police department, but it's related to all adults that come onto our campus in some way, shape, or form, whether they serve as volunteers or whether they come to share their craft, is some folks are much better at interacting with youth than others. Mm-hmm. And we have to have that lens and that filter on during that time. And those that are not as strong, we need to guide them away from that interaction. And the ones that are, we support that and let that foster. And so, and I've seen that. You've seen that I know that there are some amazing officers out there that got into being school resource officers because they love kids and they really do want to serve. But I've also run into folks that I really question why were they really protecting and serving? So in their roles. And so it's very difficult. We have to be very discerning from individual to individual as we work with folks.
I think Amy Schluter had her hand raised.
Yeah, I just unmuted her. Amy?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that, I want to echo what Gary has said, in that what might be a good direction for us to go in is really some, dialogue or discourse with PPD about what we really need when they do show up for a wellness check, or when they do show up for a 5150 call. And I think that they do really want to protect, they want to serve, but sometimes they don't have the same kind of expertise in, trauma-informed care and in how to de-escalate, students that have certain types of, challenges with self-regulation. And, they come and they're there to help, but it really needs to be done in partnership with us. And sometimes I think the expectation on their end is that they just come in and they kind of take over the situation. And then we kind of feel like maybe, who's in charge here? And so having good conversations with them about how to maybe work in partnership, I think might improve, how we're able to resolve issues together, instead of just kind of it being us or them. It kind of needs to be the two of us doing it, in tandem.
Yeah, I'll just jump off of that, of what I've been saying to a lot of people, and what I've really realized the more research I do, is the state, whatever you want to call it, the government has basically defunded everything but public education and the police. So now police and public education are providing all of the social services. And it's not the police's fault that they haven't been trained on all of these things.
Right.
And so when I am asking these questions and critiquing these things, it's not the individual department, it's not the individual police. Like, I will say gladly on the record, PPD was the best department to work with when I worked at Verity. They were the best at working with victims of rape and sexual violence. Like, I will say that a million times over. That being said, they're not mental health experts, and it's not fair to expect them to be mental health experts. And so it's not our fault that we call them for 5150s, but it's also, that's not the best solution often. But when we have no other resource, and especially no easy, 911, so that's not, an issue for our district to solve. But I do want to put out there for everyone listening that public schools and the police, between the two of us, we're expected to solve everything. Everything. Every societal woe except fires. Like, God bless the fire department, but like police and schools, that's it. That's,
sometimes it's the uniform. I don't know if the police are called, if someone in plain clothes could show up rather than in full military. Well, it looks very militaristic to me, but but I agree with Caitlin. It's not their fault, and I don't really know the right answer, but to have somebody show up with a gun and a billy club and in full uniform for a kid that's having an emotional or mental crisis can sometimes exacerbate it rather than help it. So
Ellen, I do want to say at the elementary level, at least, that when I've had to do the 5150s, it's very much like I'm in a room with a child or the school psychologist or the counselor. And then when they get there, and this is just my experience, they're like, okay, tell us what's happening. Like, how can we help? And so I'm always like, oh, this is my friend so-and-so, I had never experienced that takeover situation. And I realize I'm just one person, but I have always appreciated, like Gary said, like, you're stepping onto a Petaluma City School campus and I'm the leader here. Thank you for coming to help me with something that my child needs. So because if it was scary to the child, I would not be calling, so that's where, and before we ever get there, we've had a consult with Liz, my counselor, my school psychologist, so.
I just wonder, because Justin, you were saying that, you'll personally reach out to Danny. I've reached out to Lieutenant Lyons for different things. I just wonder if maybe Liz's question for you, I always have a question for you, Liz. We can establish a relationship with the lieutenants who are on staff, because they're not in the full, Ellen would say, militarized looking uniform. They're more in plain clothes, like how Danny and John were, when they're the SROs, with the khakis and a polo. If just an idea, just so they don't show up again in full gear, a little bit more palatable for the kids.
I totally hear that, and I appreciate that, and I don't disagree. The uniform can be intimidating. I also know that they're under-resourced, as much as that. So sometimes, when we need their support and we need them to get there when we need them, again, it's often us calling them and not the other way around. We don't find them, beating down our doors to come to campus and make their presence known. Usually when we're calling them, it's because we need them. There's a student in crisis and it's hit that level. And at that point it's, or, an angry parent who has become a safety issue on a campus or anything like that. And it's that we need someone there stat. And so a lieutenant may not always be available. And so they send who is available at the time. But we do have a relationship with PPD, and I do know who the lieutenants are. I've spoken with them personally, and I actually sat on their lieutenants hiring panel, as well, just to kind of help keep those bridges between police department and schools. But again, often, I agree the plainclothes would be a nice touch. It may just not always work out with who they can.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, I do too.
I have one more question, only because I just filled out the Aries data confirmation, so you should be happy about that, Cliff. Just fill out the data confirmation. And It was asking about if I could release my photos to the police. Uh-oh, echoing. Or I'm just-
Joanna, I can't hear you. There was
Can
like
you
an
hear me?
echo.
Okay, I think we're good now. So it's asking about releasing the photo to the police. I think I know how those photos are used with the police department, but if you could explain, just so I have clarification and just for the general crowd as well.
I'd have to look at that data confirmation because we typically don't share information. It is confidential, and if
they've been sharing, the district's been sharing that for gosh, years.
What? Pictures of students?
Decades.
To the cops?
Well, and I think it's for safety, right? Like if there's a runaway or if it's a 51 feet, I just want to know.
How is that not a violation of FERPA though?
No, they just no. It's the yearbooks.
And there are instances that you do waive your FERPA rights, like when you actually when you apply for college, you're waiving your FERPA rights.
Sure. Okay.
So I was just wondering. So it's
there was a time where we put they wanted to expand that, and it wasn't in the district's interest to get into database sharing, but it was an understanding that the PPD would ask for yearbooks and that we would provide them a yearbook. Which yearbook?
So basically, all that language is saying that you're going to have the yearbook at the end of the year.
So typically when we had SROs, typically they don't have access to Aries, right? If they needed something or needed some information, it would have to go through school admin. I've only had one scenario where they ever even used photos, and it was kind of a no name, no identifiers.
Here, are you talking here, or are you talking in your previous job?
Previous job.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah.
Previous job. Yes. In a previous position as a site principal.
In a different city.
In a different city, same state, different city.
Different time zone.
Yeah, no, same time zone. We gathered some photos. There was a serious issue, and they needed to help, have students help identify who it was, but no identifiable information, and we technically, provided it, shared it, but no identifiable information was shared. But I mean, that's one time in a 20-year career I've ever even seen that happen.
Thank you all.
I do think
I answered all my questions.
I do think that there's a follow-up to this, and I'll talk to a couple board members about joining me when we do a leadership training with our admin team, because I do think that it's going to be good for us to revisit a couple of the things that were discussed tonight, and that it's really, really critical, this whole process, watching what's taken place throughout the nation has reminded me that a lot of the things that I may have taken for granted, or other people may have taken for granted, that are certain boundaries that you don't cross as an administrator, or protections that you do as administrator, may not have been explicitly trained to some of our newer administrators. And so we need to revisit that, because when visitors come on campus, it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter whether it's the President of the United States or it's a parent. You're a visitor. And our role and responsibility is to make sure that our kids are safe. And there isn't any situation, I cannot think of any scenario where it would be appropriate to call a police officer, even if it was only to scare kids. Even if it only was that the image of a car on campus was going to keep people from doing something. That's just not, that is a very 1970s kind of leadership. And so, but I don't know if we've ever really explicitly discussed that. So I think there's a lot of.
Is there any way we could ask PPD for a number of times they've needed to use the photos of kids?
I doubt they track it, but we certainly could ask. I really doubt they track it.
Or how they use it.
Yeah. Because I mean, I don't see any of our kids' face on like milk boxes or anything.
No.
I don't know.
I think that's a great, it seems like this goes back to these difficult conversations that need to happen on so many levels. And now's the time to do it.
Yeah, it really is.
Okay, any other?
Yeah, just one more, because the title of this discussion is "And City Services." So I just want to table a topic for later. Pre-COVID, we had talked about talking about transportation in the district at some point. Right now, it's kind of a moot discussion because we don't have any transportation needs at the moment, and not going to have any in the foreseeable future. But when we think about conversion to hybrid at some point in the future, prior to this pandemic going away, I would like to hear about how Petaluma Transit works with the district, as well as our own transportation fleet.
Okay.
That was a great transition, Sheldon, to future business. And I have a few things. I would like to.
Yeah, they're working in suits, I swear.
I would like to talk about the use of the Stop It app in the schools. And I would also like to have more information about listening circles and how we can implement those on a district basis. And I also, I've heard a lot of kids talk about how they don't feel, they don't see themselves in the curriculum. And so I would like, and we've talked about the FAIR Act and ethnic studies. So Cliff, I don't know if this is possible, but I'd kind of like to see an overview of the curriculum and how, just like we were talking about that music class at Mary Collins, which really, the class is going to reflect the diversity. And I'm just wondering if that's reflected in all of our curriculum. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it's just something I've been thinking about ever since, I was reading the Dear Petaluma, Dear CASA pages and hearing it from other students about they just don't, they're struggling to see themselves in the curriculum and they don't see it, especially, our marginalized groups, students of color, Latino students, LGBT students. So I kind of would like to just know if those communities are being reflected in our community, in our curriculum. It's kind of a huge topic, I realize. But.
Yeah, that's a huge endeavor. I mean, we did a small audit for the social studies with the FAIR Act, but yeah, I mean, we would have to reach out to each department, each subject, and kind of get more specific information.
I mean, it doesn't have to be at the next board meeting. I like the idea you did the audit for social studies. Maybe we could do it for English classes. Because,
Yeah, no,
are they just reading dead white guys in English classes?
Yeah, I have heard that very specific complaint about representation in literature in particular, in English. Yeah.
As an English teacher in this district, part of, I think this is a perfect time to have these discussions, Cliff, or an audit, because I hear from a lot of teachers that just in the past 6 months, they're rethinking their curriculum, particularly in the last 2 months, and the books that they want to teach, the themes, the things like that. But we're so limited by our books, and the books have been in that book room, at least at CASA, for a long time. I don't know whether any money is ever going to be available in order to, that's just something that I think needs to be discussed in terms of how do we change this curriculum, make it more inclusive with all of the different things, like you said, Ellen, that we've been trying to do with the books that we have, with the materials that we have, and with no money to change that. I don't know how that works. A lot of the books that are in our book rooms that are really interesting and you know, do have characters that reflect our kids, were bought with grant money. And it needs to, anyway, that just a comment.
And I remember being in English classes and the when we got the, let's just call them diverse books, but that's not accurate. It was when teachers like Miss Couch or Miss Robbins,
I know,
had like a elective list of books you could choose from. So, you know, a student could still easily choose to be reading all those dead white guys, like a separate piece. We didn't need to read that.
No, I mean, there's so many great authors out there that aren't white and aren't male. And I spent a lot of time, I had a lot of freedom when I was at Tamales as far as choosing the books. And so I kind of, you know, I read one Steinbeck, but I tried to, I tried to really diversify my reading list. And I was lucky that I was able to do that. But I would just like to see what's out there in our schools and how we could maybe move towards diversifying some of that. And I know everything costs money, but we can at least start. We can have the conversation.
Literature club.
Yeah.
We should start our own personal board literature club.
I thought we were doing that.
No one wanted to read the book I suggested.
Picking the next book. Okay.
Sorry, I suggested a book. I've been reading it. So
right now I'm reading Simon the Fiddler. It's really good.
So we've got a adjournment to closed session. We're not going to have anything that we're going to be reporting out on.
Okay.
Not even our book club?
Not.
Is there any more future business before we adjourn?
Well, you have your meeting next week, so.
Is that going to be like where, or I got a question from a couple of people about the format. Is it going to be where we just discuss this amongst ourselves, or are participants able to just raise their hands, and contribute? Is it just during public comment?
I think we were assuming it's just going to be it's a single agenda item, so it's going to be pretty free flowing. Okay. And we'll just try to facilitate it in a way that we stay on a concept for a while and then move to another, rather than one person says one thing and another person says something completely different and another, you know what I mean? So we try to compartmentalize some of the issues, and it's an opportunity to dive in a little more and talk about what some of the opportunities are and some of the challenges, and you know, I mean, you heard loud and clear from folks tonight, and I think you'll hear more next week, and we'll just gather information.
Isn't our role more to listen?
Ask questions. You know, really probe people that, you know, things that people want to share.
Will the two Amy's be back next week? Because you guys have already kind of started on the train.
Yeah, it would be nice to have Pengrove.
I will be here for you guys. It is a busy, crazy time right now.
Yeah, really.
You guys are doing it, and so it would be really nice to hear more about how it's working.
Yeah, we'd love to share.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite.
I feel bad for the kids who are in my YMCA, because when I see kids on campus, I'm like, hey, come hang out with me. From afar, of course.
Yeah. So wait, Amy, you have YMCA on your campus?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
And so are kids?
The Y teachers have the kids broken into 3 groups, and they are facilitating their distance learning. So I'll think up some favorite things to share with you guys next week.
I really definitely want to hear about that.
Yeah, because that was something we talked about, is how are we going to support parents that can't be home with their kids, that are essential workers or just can't help their kids.
Sure.
So,
Great.
we want to hear more about that.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep. So
Yeah.
I am going to adjourn the meeting. I don't have a gavel, but I'm pounding my desk. We are adjourned.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Yes. At one time we had 100 people. That was amazing.
Wow.
I know. Okay.
So back to closed session.
Yes. Okay, so leave this and go to the other.